You will never be free until you confront your ego. Not the polished ego that posts inspirational quotes. Not the polite ego that smiles in meetings. Not the charming ego that plays the game well enough to win attention but never respect. No, I'm talking about the one that hides behind your eyes. The one that whispers, "You're better than them," and the next moment hisses, "You'll never be enough." The one that makes you feel like a god in your fantasies and a fraud in your reality. The one that dresses your trauma in gold and calls it a personality. The one that builds kingdoms out of defense mechanisms and then makes you the prisoner inside. Carl Jung once said, "The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego." Because the self, the real, you cannot breathe in the same room as your ego's throne. One must fall for the other to rise. And empires like that do not crumble with silence. They burn, they scream, they fight. So if you want peace, real peace, prepare for war. Not the kind fought with enemies, but the kind that begins in a quiet room when all the noise fades and you're finally left alone with your own reflection. And it doesn't flatter you. It confronts you. It shows you every way you've been performing. Every mask you wear so convincingly you almost forgot you had a face beneath it. Every posture of strength that was really fear dressed up as dominance. Every act of humility that was really pride, afraid to be seen. This is the mirror most people run from. But you didn't come here to run. You came here to reclaim what you've given away. Your voice, your fire, your freedom. And that reclamation starts with destruction, the destruction of everything you built to avoid feeling vulnerable. Because the ego cannot survive vulnerability. It cannot survive accountability. It cannot survive the moment you finally admit, "I am the architect of my own suffering." That's the moment the spell breaks. The moment you stop blaming the world for what you keep allowing. The moment you realize the people who betrayed you didn't hurt you. Your attachment to what they represented did. Your need to be right. Your need to be validated. Your need to never feel powerless. And that's the ego's favorite addiction. Control. Control the narrative. Control the perception. Control the damage by controlling the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be. But the greater that distance, the greater your suffering. So if you're suffering, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're divided. And the only way back to wholeness is through the wreckage of your ego. Then prepare yourself, because what comes next is not comfort. It's confrontation. The ego doesn't surrender with ease. It doesn't fold when you ask nicely. It fights, it bargains, it manipulates. It says, "You've done enough. This is just who you are. At least you're better than them." Healing takes time, just relax. But healing doesn't happen in the absence of pain. It happens in the presence of pain. It happens when you stop using time as an excuse. When you stop comparing your growth to those who never dared to look inward. It happens when you finally strip everything away and stand naked in the truth that every story you've ever told about your limits was a fiction authored by fear and edited by your ego. You said, "This is just how I am." No, that's just how your ego survives. You said, "I don't need anyone." No, that's just how your ego hides. You said, "They don't deserve my forgiveness." No, that's just how your ego stays in power, feeding off your pain like fuel. And if you're not careful, you'll build an entire life around those defenses. A career rooted in overcompensation. A relationship built on dominance or codependency. A personality curated for applause but hollow in silence. That's not identity. That's armor. And armor may protect you, but it also isolates you. It keeps everything out, including the truth, including love, including transformation. So when you say you want to be free, what you're really saying is, I'm ready to drop the shield. But make no mistake, that will feel like dying. Because to the ego, letting go of control is death. Letting go of certainty is death. Letting go of superiority, of performance, of perfection, it is death. But death is necessary. Because only through death can rebirth begin. You can't be reborn as long as you're trying to maintain the illusion of invulnerability. You can't evolve while clinging to every narrative that protects your ego's throne. You have to lose to rise. You have to be defeated by truth. You have to kneel before your own shadow and say, I've been lying to myself, and I'm ready to stop. That's when the real self, the one beneath the roles, beneath the masks, beneath the performance, awakens. And that awakening will cost you everything you thought was necessary. But it will give you everything that's real. Because once the real you awakens, there's no going back. You'll begin to see the world not through the lens of reaction, but through the lens of responsibility. You'll begin to recognize the places you used to chase validation and feel disgusted by your own hunger. You'll begin to watch conversations unfold and notice how many people speak only to protect their image, not to reveal their soul. And in that awareness, your old self will start to die. Not just once, but every single day. Each time you tell the truth instead of being liked, he dies. Each time you admit you're wrong instead of defending your pride, he dies. Each time you choose inner peace over external control, he dies. This is a sacred death. The ego's slow, painful, necessary dissolution. And yes, it will feel like losing. You lose the comfort of being right. You lose the high of self-righteousness. You lose the intoxication of superiority, the safety of control, the thrill of pretending. But in its place, something rare emerges. Clarity. Clarity so sharp, it cuts through illusion. Clarity so clear, you can no longer tolerate the things you once celebrated. Clarity so powerful, it will make others uncomfortable, not because you're arrogant, but because they're still hiding in the fog you just walked out of. That's the thing about awakening. It isolates you, because most people are not ready to confront their ego. They'd rather project than reflect. They'd rather sedate than shatter. They'd rather stay in chains than risk the pain of freedom. But not you. You're here because you're done performing. You're here because you'd rather be raw than rehearsed. You're here because something inside you is louder than the voice of fear. And that something is not your ego. It's your essence. It's the part of you that cannot be destroyed. It's a part that whispers when the noise fades. There is more, and I'm ready to become it. Then keep going into the fire. Because transformation isn't a sunrise. It's a detonation, a violent unraveling of the false self you've spent years protecting. And when the smoke clears, you'll stand there stripped, shattered, sovereign. You'll no longer seek peace by controlling outcomes. You'll no longer chase love by abandoning your truth. You'll no longer mistake volume for value, status for worth, attention for intimacy, because you will have seen the ego for what it is, a terrified child in the costume of a king, a voice that yells to stay alive, a mask that cracks the moment you stop being afraid to be seen. You'll walk differently after this, quieter, not because you're uncertain, but because you're anchored. Bolder, not because you have answers, but because you've made peace with not needing any. Lighter, not because life got easier, but because you finally dropped the weight that was never yours to carry. And others will notice. Some will admire it. Some will resent it. Some will try to pull you back into the old roles, the old dynamics, the old identity that made them feel safe. But you can't go back. Because once you've tasted what it feels like to live without the ego's grip, every mask feels suffocating. Every lie feels like poison. Every excuse sounds like betrayal. You are becoming untouchable, not in the way of arrogance, but in the way of wholeness. Because when the ego dies, the soul doesn't just speak, it leads. And when the soul leads, everything changes. Your vision sharpens, your boundaries solidify. Your energy no longer leaks into places that cannot hold your truth. You don't react, you respond. You don't perform, you embody. You don't prove, you become. This is not confidence. This is clarity. Not certainty in the outcome, but certainty in who you are, regardless of outcome. And that clarity, that is what freedom really is. Not the absence of fear. The mastery of it. Not the erasure of ego. The integration of it. So you don't kill the ego to destroy it. You confront it to reclaim yourself from it. And once you do, you'll remember you were never meant to bow. You were never meant to chase. You were never meant to hide behind armor just to survive. You were meant to rise, unfiltered, unmasked, unbreakable. Then let's finish what the ego cannot survive. Because this is the moment not of climax, but of consecration. The moment where you stop living as a reaction and begin living as a revelation. You are no longer the child reaching for approval. No longer the man twisting his soul into shapes for acceptance. No longer the performer on a stage, desperate for claps that never quiet the emptiness. You are the flame now. You are the weight of your own becoming. You are the storm that does not ask for permission. And you understand truly, finally, that freedom isn't about doing what you want. It's about no longer being controlled by what you were afraid to confront. The ego was never the enemy. It was the mask you needed when you didn't know who you were. It was the armor that kept you alive before you had the strength to live. But now you don't need it anymore. You have something stronger than the ego. You have awareness. You have walked through fire and you did not beg for rain. You stood in the mirror and did not flinch. You faced the empire within and let it burn brick by brick, lie by lie. And now you build again, but this time not with fear, with fire. Not with illusions, with integrity. Not with armor, with authenticity. You speak less and say more. You'll move slower and go further. You'll stop trying to be understood and start being undeniable. That's what happens when you confront your ego. You stop performing your power and start living it. So take one last look at the version of you who thought strength meant domination, silence meant control, and identity meant armor. Thank him. He got you here, but he doesn't get to go further. This is where he ends. And you begin. The self, whole, wild, unchained. And from this day forward, you will never again confuse ego with identity. You will never again let fear wear the crown that belongs to your soul. Because now you know you'll never be free until you confront your ego. And now that you have, you're free. Walk and never bow again. So now we arrive at the threshold not of triumph, but of truth. You stand at the edge of everything false, falling away. And beneath your feet are the ashes of every mask you thought you needed to survive. The ego didn't go quietly. It never does. It screamed. It begged. It fought like hell to stay relevant. Because for years, it was your voice. For years, it was your armor. For years, it was your story. But now, it's not your master. It's not your prison. It's not your name. Because you dared to do what few ever will. You looked inward and didn't look away. You turned down the noise and heard your own silence. You stepped behind the curtain and faced the wizard, small, insecure, terrified. And in that moment, you realized the ego was never strong. It was just loud. And now it is silent. And in that silence, you found you, the real you, the one who doesn't need to win every argument to feel worthy, the one who doesn't use pain as a personality trait, the one who doesn't need to be admired to know they matter, the one who's been buried under years of performance, just waiting for the curtain to fall. And now the curtain has fallen. And there you are, whole, withered, wide awake. This is the man who doesn't flinch when misunderstood, who doesn't apologize for his truth, who doesn't need to dominate the room to own his space, because he knows who he is, and that is more powerful than anything he used to pretend to be. And what happens now? Now, you live, not as a reaction, not as a disguise, not as an echo of someone else's expectation, but as a force present, grounded, sovereign. You speak differently now, not louder, just deeper, because your voice no longer trembles under the weight of your image. It rings with the resonance of a man who has faced his own shadow and come back with light. You walk differently now, not faster, just straighter, because you're no longer sprinting to escape something. You're no longer bending to be liked, twisting to be safe, shrinking to be digestible. You exist now, fully, finally, without a filter of fear. And yes, the world will notice. Some will feel threatened by the clarity you now wear, like armor. Some will try to remind you who you used to be. Some will resent your liberation because it exposes their chains. Let them, because your path is no longer about being palatable. It's about being true. And the truth is this: you were never meant to be ruled by ego. You were never meant to decorate your prison and call it home. You were never meant to perform peace while chaos bloomed behind your eyes. You were meant to confront the lie, to dismantle the false self, to kill the mask, and to rise unmasked, unashamed, untouchable. So rise. Rise not as who you were told to be, not as who you learned to be, but as who you always were before the world made you forget. You'll never be free until you confront your ego. And now you have, and now you are. Walk forward and never wear the mask again. You were not meant to run after things that vanish. You were not meant to chase illusions across deserts of self-abandonment, begging the world to give you what you haven't yet become. No, you were meant to attract. You were meant to sit in the gravity of your own becoming so fiercely that the world can no longer look away. Wealth isn't chased, it's magnetized. And magnetism isn't luck. It's not charm. It's alignment with who you are, with what you believe, with what you tolerate, and most of all, with what you refuse to tolerate. Wealth flows not to the desperate, but to the disciplined. It flows not to the loud, but to the intentional. It flows to the man who no longer defines himself by what he needs, but by what he gives off. Presence, value, clarity, certainty. These are currencies the world respects more than cash. You were trained to run. Run faster, hustle harder, sweat more. But there's a difference between movement and momentum. One wears you down. The other pulls the world in. You don't attract wealth by trying to convince the world of your worth. You attract it by becoming the man the world can't ignore. Magnetism begins where inner conflict ends. The man who is divided within can never command anything outside of him. He speaks one truth and lives another. He desires abundance, but breathes fear. He projects confidence, but inside, he's still begging for validation. And the universe is precise. It doesn't give you what you ask for. It gives you what you mirror. Wealth is not seduced by potential, it's seduced by power. And power isn't noise. It's coherence. A soul that has reconciled its shadow. A mind that no longer flinches at pressure. A presence that feels like still water calm, deep, and unfuckwithable. You want to attract wealth? Kill the version of you that thinks you need it. Let him die. Bury the one who builds for applause. Mourn the one who compares, copies, chases. Then resurrect something else. Something sovereign. Something still. Something that knows what it is without needing permission, performance, or proof. Because that's the paradox. You only attract what you no longer chase. You only magnetize what you no longer obsess over. Not because you've given up, but because you've become the kind of man whose thoughts are clean, whose emotions are integrated, whose standards are untouchable. The wealthy don't beg for opportunities. They create gravity, and gravity pulls all things toward it, not with effort, but with essence. So fix your essence, not your profile, not your pitch, not your marketing funnel. Fix your frequency, because frequency never lies. It's why some men walk into a room and shift the temperature, why others speak and nothing happens, why some build empires from silence while others shout into the void. You don't need to scream to be seen. You need to resonate. And resonance comes from alignment, from deciding that your values are not negotiable, that your peace is more expensive than any bag, that your presence will be built in the shadows, refined in the fire, and revealed only when it is inevitable. This is how wealth is magnetized, not through performance, but through embodiment. You don't get rich by chasing. You get rich by becoming a source. The source of insight, the source of structure, the source of peace, the source of results. And when you are the source, the world must come to you. Because there is no other supply. Because you stopped begging and started becoming. You stopped consuming and started constructing your own identity, your own values, your own lane. And now you don't chase. You choose. You choose what you tolerate. You choose what you build. You choose what enters your space because you finally understand. Your environment is not just a backdrop. It's a mirror and a magnet. What you allow around you reveals what you believe about yourself. The wealthy man doesn't surround himself with comfort. He surrounds himself with pressure, not chaos, not noise, but pressure, the kind that forges clarity, disciplines the weak mind, and sharpens intuition like a blade. Because he knows comfort is where value goes to die. And magnetism is born from resistance. You must become the kind of man who can hold tension without breaking, who can carry silence without rushing to fill it, who can walk into uncertainty with his spine straight and his conscience clear. The magnetic man does not flinch. He does not rush. He waits because he's already become. And when you become fully, unapologetically, ruthlessly, you no longer need to chase. Wealth finds you, not because you played the algorithm right, but because you've rewritten your internal code. And now your every action echoes from that code. Your words don't beg, they command. Your offers don't plead, they invite. Your presence doesn't scream, it anchors. This is the unseen economy, the currency of identity. The psychology of pull, it's not taught in school, because schools are factories. They teach you how to produce, not how to possess. They teach you to obey, not how to own. But you're done being a product of that system. You're not a tool. You're the blueprint. You're not a follower. You're the signal. So let the others chase. Let them run for crumbs. Let them decorate their cage and call it freedom. You build gravity. You sit in stillness. You hold the line. And when you do, the world bends. Not because you shouted, not because you begged, but because your becoming could no longer be denied. This is what magnetism feels like. This is how wealth kneels before the man who knows himself. Not a man who chases, a man who chooses. A man who no longer needs noise to feel alive. A man who doesn't trade attention for authenticity. A man who walks through the storm without checking if anyone's watching, because his steps are not for the crowd, they are for the throne. And the throne is not given. It is not inherited. It is earned through silence, through sovereignty, through the ruthless shedding of everything that is not you. This is why the magnetic man terrifies the world, because he cannot be controlled. He cannot be bribed with comfort. He cannot be seduced by trends. He has already built a kingdom within, and any wealth he attracts is merely the reflection of that unseen empire. You want to attract wealth? Don't ask what you need to do. Ask who you need to become. Not as a tactic, but as a truth. Not for results, but for reality. Because the man who becomes magnetic doesn't try to be. He doesn't calculate how to impress. He doesn't posture or pretend or polish his image. He simply is. His magnetism is not in his strategy, it's in his stillness, his clarity, his refusal to bend when the world sells out for applause. That's the man who attracts, not because he asks, but because he aligns. He's not pulling wealth toward him. He's pulling truth toward reality. And truth cannot be ignored. It doesn't need marketing. It doesn't need manipulation. It doesn't beg. It stands. And when you stand fully, deeply, without needing the world to clap, you become the axis. Not the follower, not the echo, the source. And wealth always finds the source, because it knows that's where it belongs. Because wealth, real wealth, does not belong to the man who hustles mindlessly. It belongs to the man who hosts the frequency of abundance. Not as a theory, but as a way of being, a way of speaking that's rooted in self-possession, a way of moving that radiates self-respect, a way of choosing that cuts through distraction like a blade through fog. This man is not hoping to win. He expects it not from arrogance, but from alignment. He has already paid the price. He has walked away from mediocrity, even when it felt familiar. He has chosen solitude over shallow company. He has buried the part of him that begged, that bent, that broke at the feet of cheap validation. And what remains is a man forged by fire. A man who has chosen discipline over dopamine so many times that his soul no longer craves applause, it craves impact. Because once you taste what it's like to move from center, to act from alignment, to build from purpose, you can never go back to begging for breadcrumbs from systems designed to starve you. Magnetism is a rebellion. It is the uprising of the sovereign self. It is a refusal to be a slave to the algorithm of conformity. It says, I will not chase what I already am. I will not pursue what I've already become. I am the signal. I am the standard. I am the wealth. So let them chase. Let them drown in performance. Let them sell out their essence for a seat at someone else's table. You build presence so dense it becomes gravity. You become so real, the world cannot digest you, only respond to you. Because when you magnetize wealth, you don't just receive it. You redefine it. You stretch its meaning beyond money. You elevate it into something sacred, something rooted in truth. Not just having more, but being more. That's the final key. That's the throne they can never take. That's the man the world waits for, even when it doesn't know it yet. So stop running. Stop chasing. Stop knocking. Stand still. Build your frequency. Sharpen your clarity. Own your identity. And watch what finds you. Watch what finds you when you no longer dilute your presence to be palatable. Watch what finds you when you stop negotiating with weakness. Watch what finds you when you no longer apologize for your power, your pace, your pain-transformed purpose. Because at that point, you don't attract money, you attract movements. You don't build businesses, you build realms. You don't manage impressions, you bend perception itself. This is not the surface-level attraction of trends or tricks. This is core-level gravitational pull, and it cannot be taught through formulas. It must be forged in solitude, in silence, in the storm. Magnetism is not the result. It's the reward for the man who chose to become unshakable when everything told him to shatter. For the man who stared into the abyss and built a bridge instead of collapsing. This is the man who owns time because he no longer spends it. He invests it in becoming, in building, in bleeding for a vision that no one else sees until they do. And when they finally see, it's too late. Because by then, he is the vision. He is the authority. He is system. So let the world keep looking for hacks. Let it search for the shortcut to seduce results it hasn't earned. You don't seduce. You command. You don't attract by pretending. You attract by becoming the most non-negotiable version of yourself. That's what magnetism is. It's the result of every invisible decision you made when no one was watching. It's the echo of discipline, the scent of self-respect, the aftermath of alignment. It is what remains after the world tried to distract you and you said, no, I know who I am now. And from that knowing, from that immovable clarity, everything you once chased now turns and begins to move toward you. Not because it pities you, not because it was convinced, but because you are now inevitable. Because at some point you will realize wealth isn't just material, it's spiritual. And money is not the end, it's the mirror, a reflection of your energy, your alignment, your integrity, or the lack of it. You can chase wealth from ego, from fear, from insecurity, and you might catch it, but it will burn you. It will make you a prisoner of the very thing you worshipped, because anything you pursue without soul will own you. It will dictate your choices, distort your identity, and destroy your peace. The wealthy man who is spiritually poor is just a beggar in better clothes. He may wear success, but inside he's bankrupt, starving for meaning, addicted to noise, haunted by the silence he keeps avoiding. But the man who builds wealth from depths, who aligns his values with his vision, who makes money a servant to his soul instead of a substitute for it, that man cannot be touched. He's not owned. He's anchored. Because his wealth is not just in what he has, it's in who he's become to hold it. It's in how he made it. It's in how clean his conscience is when he counts it. You see, real wealth begins the moment you realize that your soul and your strategy are not separate. They are married. And when they are not in union, your money becomes a weight. But when they are in union, your money becomes light. It expands your voice. It amplifies your essence. It deepens your reach. Because now your wealth is not built on force. It's built on truth. You don't manipulate. You magnetize. You don't impress. You inspire. You don't extract. You elevate. This is spiritual wealth, not a net worth, but a soul print. Not your possessions, but your presence. Not your lifestyle, but your legacy. And this level of wealth cannot be stolen, copied, or faked, because it is encoded in who you are. It comes from walking through your own shadows, owning them, holding them, forgiving yourself, elevating your standard for what kind of energy you let lead your life. Not fear, not greed, not scarcity, but truth, but clarity, but service, but power. The quiet, noble, kind, The power that doesn't need to dominate because it has already mastered itself. And from that place, you become not just wealthy, you become dangerous to every system built on manipulation. Because now you are both the mirror and the magnet. You reflect what others are afraid to see. And you attract what others spend their whole lives chasing without losing yourself in the process. That's wealth. That's divinity. That's you, when you finally remember what you were before the world made you forget. As your wealth grows, the test begins. Not of your strategy, not of your hustle, but of your soul. Because money doesn't change you, it reveals you. It puts a spotlight on everything unresolved. Your addictions, your wounds, your pride, your shame. It will whisper to your ego, you are invincible now. And if your soul is not seated in truth, you will listen. You will rise on the outside while decaying within. But if you've done the inner work, if you faced your shadow, healed your history, and chosen to remain whole, then money won't own you. You will own it. You'll wield it like a blade of light, clean, sharp, purposeful. You'll fund movements, not just indulgences. You'll build empires that reflect who you are, not just what you want. You'll walk into rooms not to prove, but to protect what matters. And when you speak, people will feel that your voice isn't inflated by wealth, it's fortified by wisdom. Because at the end of all of it, it's not about chasing or earning. It's about becoming someone so aligned that wealth must find you. So integrated, that money becomes a sacred tool, not a mask, not a trap, not a crutch. And one day you will look in the mirror. No crowd, no applause, no performance, just you. And you will say, not with pride, but with peace. I have nothing to chase, nothing to prove, nothing to hide. I am the magnet. I am the source. I am the wealth. And when you can say that, the world will finally say back, welcome home.